And Michelle, as you're talking about some of these things, and if you just joined me, I have Michelle Bachmann in studio with me. This is part one of a two-part series. You've opened the door here because I want to play another soundbite. You were talking about some of the insanity going on, and I never thought, Michelle, that I would hear that America is trying to unleash revenge on our best ally, Israel, not just our best ally in the Middle East, probably our best ally in the entire world. Jay Sekulow talking about the kind of revenge that's being perpetrated on Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, I think what you've got, I call this, this is President Obama's revenge, because in a sense this election almost was an election between Barack Obama and Bibi Netanyahu, and Netanyahu won overwhelmingly. This idea that you're going to force through the United Nations a resolution of the conflict ignores one very significant fact, and that is who's in control of the Palestinian Authority. And the fact of the matter is the control group of the Palestinian Authority is Hamas. And Hamas in its charter calls for the destruction of what they call the Zionist regime, which is the state of Israel, and the destruction of Jews individually. They say it's part of their jihad. And this is in the charter document with the group you're going to be sitting across the table from negotiating a peace. The United States has had a long history, Shannon, as you know, of blocking these anti-Israel resolutions in the Security Council and in the General Assembly. And unfortunately, the administration is at least putting out there that they may not be that protecting force for Israel. And the idea that this is revenge, and that's the only way you can really look at it at this point, I think is very dangerous for the United States and very dangerous for Israel.
I want to go back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier, because I don't want the time to get away from us. But recently, Iran and Hezbollah were removed from the state sponsors of terrorism. You and I know they're the two worst, probably one and two. And talk to me a little bit about who did this and who's putting any kind of pressure against this, because if we're taking outfits like Iran and Hezbollah off the state sponsor of terror list, America is in the process of allowing, and this is going to happen in an end-time war, it's called Armageddon, of allowing the world to be destroyed.
Obama is dismantling America's intelligence system and national security system. I want to make it very clear. The United States, when I came into Congress, had 4 nations. Of all of the nations in the world, only 4 were designated state sponsors of terror. One was Sudan. Why? Because Sudan had radical Islamic terrorists who were violently murdering people. Another was Syria. Why Syria? Syria has tried repeatedly to build nuclear weapons. They also have been murdering people. Over 200,000 individuals have been murdered from Bashar al-Assad. Assad also is a puppet essentially under the Iranian thumb. Iran is so powerful. Iran has been on the march, and they've been expanding their empire ahead of any nuclear deal. They now control the capital in Syria. They control capitals in Yemen.
That's
they
right.
control the capital in Iraq, essentially Bahrain. They are on the march across the world. So there's a state sponsor of terror in Sudan, in Syria, also in Cuba. Barack Obama, for inexplicable reasons, decided to lift the designation with Cuba as being a state sponsor of terror. Of all of the state sponsors of terror in the world, of all of the countries, the worst by far, the UN sees this, other nations around the world have agreed, Iran is the worst offender of terrorism across the world. Everyone in your listening audience needs to know and understand. Iran is personally responsible for the murders of over 1/3 of American soldiers who are fighting in the Iraq War. So they have murdered our soldiers. They have blown through UN resolution after UN resolution that has tried to restrict them on obtaining the worst possible weapons. And with Iran murdering and pillaging and being on the march to have more empire and more control across the world, and being, again, sponsors of terrorism, imagine what they will do with a nuclear weapon when they are the chief terrorists of the world. That's why this is so extremely important. And it's why it's so inexplicable that the Obama administration, in the midst of Iran blowing through all of the agreements that they were supposed to have in these last 18 months, even recently at the end of March, the Ayatollah said, "Death to America again." I mean, my phrase when I ran for president was, when a madman speaks, listen. That's what history teaches us. These madmen that run Iran are absolutely clear and consistent about what their intentions are. They've never been anything other than consistent that they intend to wipe Israel off the map and wipe the United States out of the map. They have the capacity to deliver a bomb today to Iran and Europe. They are trying to get missile capacity to deliver to the United States. And last year in 2014, the report is now open source. It was classified when I had it last year. But this year, Iran is expected to have an intercontinental ballistic missile that will be able to deliver a nuclear warhead to the United States. If they have that missile capacity, which, by the way, Iran is the missile leader of the world in the Middle East. They are the number one missile leader of the world, and their partnership is with North Korea. North Korea is kind of like the Walmart of missile development in that part of the world. So you have these thugs coming together, and you have that we already know that they've been trying to defy orders and get nuclear warheads and do the R&D and the trigger development to make a nuclear warhead and all the various component parts. Knowing that they're doing that, why in the world would you give Iran everything they want and then some?
All right. Do you have an answer to that question? I know it's kind of a mystery,
yes,
but
I'll give you the answer.
Yes, give us your perspective,
The answer
please.
is that Barack Obama wants them to have that capacity to such an extent that they are no longer going to support Israel in international forums or agencies or at the UN General Assembly or at the Security Council. The president has completely changed America's relationships on foreign policy. We know that because he put as his lead negotiator a man named Malley. Malley is as anti-Israel and anti-Jewish as you can get. And Obama's man, Malley, has so changed the United States' view, our current position. He has legitimized Palestine's rejection of Israel's right to exist. That's what Malley believes. He also agrees with the right of return so that, in other words, Israel will be flooded with new Palestinians coming to live inside of the borders of Israel. In other words, no longer making it a Jewish state so that only Palestinians would be elected, and then they would eject Jews out of Israel. He believes that Palestinian terror is understandable. This is the guy that our president has running our foreign policy with Israel in the Middle East. This is what he believes, that Palestinian terror is understandable and commendable. He was on President Obama's foreign policy team in 2008. He has direct contacts with Hamas, which is a designated terrorist organization under the Muslim Brotherhood. He's our president's senior advisor on the Gulf states and on Israel, and his goal is to realign U.S. policy away from Israel, and now is threatening Israel by going to the UN Security Council to impose on Israel through the Security Council the taking away of Israel's land. This is where God gets involved. Anytime you separate land from Israel, that's when you see the hand of God. And what we see is Obama has his foreign policy team led by Malley, who believes in the Palestinian goal of destroying the Jewish state. We are going to continue to see Israel bashers in Team Obama for the next 22 months. They're going to expand their anti-Israel positions, along with Israel giving up the land, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, to the 1949 armistice lines. And what I want to say is, Jan, in the last year, we saw Vladimir Putin of Russia steal Crimea and make Crimea now a part of Russia and go into Ukraine. I traveled over to Ukraine to meet with Ukrainian leaders because we saw this aggression from Russia. Where do you see Barack Obama on the world stage calling on Putin to give back Crimea? Where do you see Barack Obama calling on Putin to pay restitution for the 300 innocent human beings who Russia shot out of the sky in an airplane? Where do you see Barack Obama telling Putin to get out of eastern Ukraine? Or where is he telling the Palestinians to get off of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem? Or is he calling on Florida to give itself back to Spain or Virginia to give itself back to England? Why is it just Israel is the only country in the world who's supposed to give up its land that it won defending itself in an unprovoked attack from Arab terrorists, from Arab